The rain in the Pacific Northwest does not fall, it attacks. It drives down in relentless, freezing sheets that turn the earth into a slurry of mud and pine needles, a terrain designed to break ankles and drown spirits. Deep in the timberline, miles from the nearest paved road, John Rambo stood knee-deep in a swollen creek, the icy water swirling around his legs with the force of a desperate animal. He was not hiding, and he was not running. He was waiting. In his hands, he held a heavy timber, a massive fallen cedar log he was leveraging into place to bridge the washout. His muscles, corded and scarred, strained against the wet wood. At his age, most men were sitting in recliners, watching wars on television. Rambo was out here, fighting gravity, fighting the cold, fighting the silence. He pushed, and his shoulders screamed. A jagged line of white-hot pain shot down his back, originating from a scar left by shrapnel 3 decades ago. The pain was old, a familiar roommate that never paid rent but refused to leave. For a moment, his vision blurred. The gray woods dissolved, replaced by the humid, suffocating green of a bamboo cage. The smell of pine vanished, replaced by the stench of stagnant water and rotting vegetation. He could hear the buzzing of flies and the shouting in a language he had tried to forget. The flashback hit him with the force of a physical blow, threatening to buckle his knees and drop him into the freezing current. The past was a predator, always stalking, waiting for a moment of weakness to sink its teeth in. But Rambo did not drop the log. He closed his eyes and breathed. He didn't try to push the memory away. He knew that resisting the demons only made them stronger. Instead, he welcomed the pain. He used it. He converted the agony of the memory into fuel for the machine. Pain is just a signal, he told himself. It tells you you're still alive. If he could feel the shrapnel wound, he wasn't dead yet. And if he wasn't dead, he had work to do. He roared, a sound that tore from his throat like a challenge to the storm itself, and heaved the massive log upward. With a wet thud, it locked into place. He stood there for a moment, chest heaving, water dripping from his long, matted hair, watching the bridge hold against the current. He had won the moment. He climbed out of the creek and walked back to his small, rough-hewn cabin hidden in the fold of the mountain. Inside, he stripped off the wet gear, revealing a roadmap of violence etched onto his skin. Every scar was a story, a coordinate in time and place where the world had tried to kill him and failed. He sat by the wood stove, taking out his knife, the heavy, serrated blade that was as much a part of him as his own hand. He began to oil it, the repetitive motion grounding him in the present. People often asked him, in the rare times he spoke to them, how he survived. They wanted to know about the tactics, the weapons, the combat. They didn't understand. It wasn't about the gun. It was about the mind. He looked into the fire and thought about the men he had served with, the ones who didn't come back, the ones who came back whole in body but destroyed in spirit. The difference wasn't physical strength. The difference was the ability to endure the silence. The world is loud. It distracts you with comfort, with noise, with promises of safety. But when you are alone in the jungle, or the desert, or the high mountains, the noise stops. You are left with yourself. And if you don't like who you are, if you haven't mastered your own fear, that silence will eat you alive. Rambo had learned that peace wasn't a location you could hike to. Peace was the ability to sit in the middle of hell and not flinch. He remembered Colonel Troutman's voice, echoing in the cavern of his mind. "You're a full-blooded combat machine, John." He used to hate that. He used to want to be normal. He had spent years drifting through small towns, looking for a diner that would serve him, looking for a job that didn't require a gun. But he realized now that trying to be something you are not is the quickest way to die. He wasn't a civilian. He wasn't a parker of cars. He was a warrior. Acceptance was the final key. Once he stopped fighting his own nature, he became unbreakable. The wolf does not apologize for its teeth. The storm does not apologize for the thunder. He stood up and tied a strip of red cloth around his forehead, tightening it until he could feel the pulse in his temples. He wasn't going to war today, not in the traditional sense. But life itself is a war. It is a war against entropy, against laziness, against the creeping rot of complacency. Every morning you wake up, you are on the battlefield. The enemy is the voice that says, "Sleep in." The enemy is the ache in your joints. The enemy is the memory of yesterday's failure. You have to clear the chamber, lock and load, and face it. He stepped back out into the storm. The wind was howling harder now, snapping branches like matchsticks. Most would retreat. Rambo stepped off the porch and began to run. He ran into the teeth of the gale, his boots slamming into the mud, his breath pluming in the cold air. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs felt like lead, until the only thing that existed was the next step. He didn't run to escape. He ran to remind the world and himself that he was still here, that he was still dangerous, that as long as there was breath in his body, he would not surrender. As he reached the ridgeline, looking down over the vast, gray expanse of the wilderness, he stood tall. He was a ghost in the machine of the world, a glitch they couldn't fix, a fire they couldn't put out. He understood that you don't live for the applause. You don't live for the welcome home parade that never comes. You live because the alternative is to fade away, and Rambo would never fade. He would burn until the fuel was gone. He looked at the horizon, his eyes dark and focused. Nothing is over. Nothing is ever over. You just reload,